The English language came to South Africa's shores through the lips of the British colonisers. The British arrived in the Cape in 1806. Soldiers, administrators, missionaries, settlers and fortune seekers. Well, the language took hold as the settlers moved into the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal through to the Northern Cape in the diamond mines and the gold mines of the Witwatersrand. Today, English is the main language of communication in government and business due to its prevalence throughout the country. But it's not the first language of the majority of South Africans, despite it being widely understood and spoken.
Spoken by more than 1.5 billion people across the country, English is the second largest global language, including those it uses as a second language. In South Africa, only 8.4% of households speak it in their homes. isiZulu is the dominant home language, spoken in 24.7 households, followed by isiXhosa at 15.6% and Afrikaans at 12.1%. But English is the second most spoken language outside of SA homes, with 17.6% of the population using it. But how did this language find its dominance in South Africa? From the beginning, English was imposed in the Cape, finding resistance from the Afrikaner community. There was an attempt to make English the exclusive language of law and education, even in the overwhelming Dutch Afrikaner-speaking rural areas. This caused deep resentment. The hostility towards English was entrenched to the wars fought between the English and the Boers. It became the fair answer taal, the language of the enemy.
I like the determination of the English speakers, and you know, I like it because they guard it with all the energy they have, because they know it is themselves, it is their language, it is them. We who think that our language, we are English, we are only secondary. And that is why, Changisa, it's going to take us a very long time, I'm afraid, to claim that this is our land, especially the youth.
In most countries where it serves as the lingua francaise, English gained a reputation as the language of the social elite. Even in South Africa, those who are able to speak fluent English with the correct accent are seen as upwardly mobile. A difficult language to master, though, with the accompanying pressure to use it correctly, creating challenges in the classroom.
Other was still standing at the open door, the baby in his arms, a look of stupefaction on his face.
In primary school, I used to do English as my home language, and then I got here in grade 9, then I did English as my first additional language. So it was easy for me to adapt because I'm a reader, so every day I practice and every day I'm improving my vocabulary as well as my fluency in English.
It pains me to see that some of the learners in Ngane High School struggle with communicating with their teachers in class. One of the things that I've noticed that most of our learners speak vernacular during English periods and in other learning areas. Then speaking vernacular becomes a problem because when you're writing an exam, it becomes a problem because you cannot interpret what is being asked, and it takes time for you to interpret it back to English.
English is the language of instruction. Now, they must respond in English because in all of the learning areas, they are taught in English, except Xhosa, of course. So I think the problem is that, as I was saying, that they can't respond to some of the questions. I think as teachers, we need to use the language of instructions more often so that these learners can get used to responding in this English.
Politicians and academics are calling for the development and modernization of African languages as languages for tuition at higher education level. But the practicality of that, the cost and public opinion favors English. Much of the value attached to English rests in the status as an international language.
Well, I personally do not look at the way and pronunciation and grammar when I look at oral presentations specifically, because from a social linguistic point of view, that for me is not the point. For me, it's the content with which students speak. However, students keep surveillance of one another. in terms of how they of how they speak. So if someone pronounces something incorrectly, if I pronounce something incorrectly in class, I hear laughter, because the idea is to know good English.
English remains the political neutral language for public use, seen at school and university level. Language scholars see English as a resource that must be owned by South Africans to be used as a gateway to the world, while indigenous languages are nurtured. Lerato Tipa, SABC News, Port Elizabeth.